It started like any other quiet afternoon in our neighborhood. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the rooftops, casting that soft, golden light through the kitchen window. I had just finished cleaning up after lunch when I heard the unmistakable sound of water dripping. A slow, rhythmic tap, tap-he-tap from under the sink. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe just the usual old pipes, but when I opened the cabinet, a small puddle was already forming. Great. Another thing on the long list of things my husband kept saying he'd fix but never got around to. He was out of town again, work trip, third one this month. So, I did what I always do, handled it myself. I went out to the porch, phone in hand, ready to call a plumber, but then I saw my neighbor across the street, Eric. Tall, quiet, a little rough around the edges, but always polite. He was unloading tools from the back of his truck. He waved. I hesitated for a moment, then crossed the street. "Hey, Eric," I called out, trying not to sound too desperate. "You any good with leaky pipes?" He smiled, that easy, laid-back kind of smile. "I've fixed worse," he said, setting down his tool bag. "Want me to take a look?" I should have thought twice. But in that moment, I was just relieved. He came over, stepped inside like he'd done it 100 times before, and got right to work under the sink. We talked, nothing serious, just light conversation. The kind of stuff you only really notice when your house feels too quiet for too long. I offered him a drink. He laughed when I tried to hand him a fancy glass for water. "Just a regular cup is fine," he said. That kind of guy. As the minutes passed, something shifted. I could feel it in the air. The way he looked at me when he stood up to test the faucet. The way our hands brushed when I handed him a towel. It was subtle, so subtle I almost convinced myself it was nothing. But I knew better. The silence between us started to feel louder than the dripping had ever been. By the time the leak was fixed, it was already getting dark. I thanked him, and he lingered. Not in a pushy way, just long enough that I had to ask, "Want to stay for dinner?" I don't know what made me say it. Maybe I didn't want to eat alone again. Maybe it was the way he made me feel noticed in a way I hadn't in months. He said yes. 1 hour turned into 2. Dinner turned into wine. The house felt warmer than usual, the conversation deeper. And somewhere between laughing over old stories and sitting too close on the couch, I forgot all about the leak under the sink, and remembered something else I thought I'd lost. But it wasn't supposed to go that far. I swear, I didn't plan for what happened next. And that's when everything started to change. The moment he leaned back on the couch, glass in hand, something about the room felt different. Not just the lighting or the music playing softly in the background, it was something in the way he looked at me, like he saw through the tired smile I'd been wearing for weeks. Like he noticed how lonely I'd been, even when I pretended everything was fine. Eric wasn't just a neighbor. He'd lived across the street for over 3 years. We'd exchanged hellos, borrowed sugar, waved from our porches, but we'd never had a real conversation before that night. I knew he worked in construction, lived alone, and had a dog that barked at every passing car. That was it. I never thought of him as anything more than the guy next door. But that night, sitting there, I saw him differently. Or maybe, I saw myself differently. My marriage had been quiet for a long time. Not in the peaceful way, more like two people living in the same space but not really seeing each other. My husband was always gone, either on business or buried in his phone when he was home. We didn't fight, not loudly anyway. But there was this heavy silence between us. The kind you stop noticing until someone else fills it. Eric told me about his work, the kind of hands-on projects he loved, how he enjoyed fixing things because at least then he could see something actually improve. He paused when he said that. Like he meant more than just pipes and cabinets. I listened, laughed more than I expected, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, seen. I tried to keep things light, reminding myself it was just dinner, just a neighbor helping out. But there were little moments that made it hard to ignore what was unfolding. The way he reached for my glass instead of his by mistake. The way our legs brushed and neither of us moved. His eyes kept finding mine, and I didn't look away. I kept telling myself nothing would happen. I was just being kind. Just enjoying a rare night of company. But deep down, I could feel that line slowly starting to blur. A part of me wanted to stop it, while another part, a quieter, more honest part, wasn't so sure. Then, as the clock ticked past midnight, and the house fell into a silence that felt anything but innocent, he looked at me again. And I realized, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. I stood up to clear the empty plates, hoping the small movement would shift the energy in the room. But it didn't. Eric followed me into the kitchen, his steps quiet, almost hesitant. He leaned against the doorway, watching as I rinsed the dishes, and for a moment, it felt like we were frozen in some strange middle space, not quite friends, not something more, yet. "So," he said, voice low, "your husband, he's away often?" I paused, not sure how much to say. "Yeah. Work keeps him busy." That was the simple version. The one I'd rehearsed for neighbors and friends. The truth was more complicated. We hadn't connected in months. Even when he called, it felt like we were just checking boxes. I missed him. Or maybe I just missed who we used to be. Eric nodded slowly. "Doesn't seem right, you being here alone all the time." His tone was careful, but the words landed heavy. I dried my hands and turned to face him. He looked sincere, not pushy, just concerned. That's what made it more confusing. This wasn't some careless flirtation. It felt like he actually saw what I tried so hard to hide. That's when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, my husband's name flashing with an incoming call. My heart skipped. I let it ring. Eric noticed, but didn't say anything. Just looked down at the floor and shifted his weight, like he suddenly remembered where he was. I finally answered on the last ring, stepping into the hallway. He was checking in, casual as ever. Asking how the day went, if I had dinner, if I remembered to lock the back door. I answered like I always did, brief, polite, emotionally distant. He didn't ask if I missed him. He never did. When I hung up, I didn't go back to the kitchen right away. I just stood there, staring at the family photo on the wall. We looked so happy in that picture. A beach trip from 2 years ago. I couldn't even remember the last time we'd taken a photo together. Back in the kitchen, Eric had moved to the window, looking out at the dark street. "I should probably head out," he said without turning around. But I could tell he didn't want to. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted him to either. What I didn't know then was that this night was about to set off a chain of choices I couldn't take back. I stood in the hallway longer than I should have, hands still resting on the phone, heart racing even though nothing had really happened. But that was the thing, it almost had. The space between what was and what could be was getting thinner with every second. And when I finally stepped back into the kitchen, I saw it in Eric's eyes too. That uncertainty. That quiet storm just waiting for a reason to let loose. He turned around slowly, his hand still resting on the windowsill. "You okay?" he asked, voice softer now. I nodded, but I don't think I convinced either of us. "I just needed a minute," I said. There was a pause between us, heavy with everything we weren't saying. The air felt warmer, thicker, like the whole house was holding its breath. It wasn't just about attraction anymore. It was something deeper, guilt, temptation, confusion, all wrapped together. I kept wondering where the line was. Had I already crossed it? Or was I just standing at the edge, waiting? Eric broke the silence. "You don't have to explain anything to me," he said. "I just came to fix a leak, remember?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I nodded again, forcing a small laugh. "Yeah, but somehow, that turned into this." He took a step toward me, then stopped. "Look, if I'm making this harder for you, I'll go." And that's when I should have said yes. Should have thanked him, walked him to the door, and ended the night like nothing happened. But I didn't. I looked at him and said, no. Just stay for a little while. He didn't move, not at first. We both stood there in the kitchen, not knowing what staying meant anymore. He was watching me like he was waiting for permission to feel what he already felt. And I was trying to pretend that if I didn't name it, it wouldn't become real. Then, just as I was about to speak, the sound of a car door slammed outside. I froze. My eyes darted to the clock. It was too late for deliveries, and too early for the neighbors to be back from anywhere. Eric looked at me, confused. I slowly moved to the front window and peeked through the blinds. And that's when I saw it. My husband's car. Parked right in front of the house. He wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. For a second, I couldn't move. I just stood there at the window, staring at his car, my thoughts racing faster than my heartbeat. My husband wasn't supposed to be back until the next evening. That was the plan. That was the reason I even allowed myself to relax for one night, to forget the rules, to blur the line I had drawn so carefully in my mind. Eric stepped beside me, his voice low. Is that him? I nodded slowly, not taking my eyes off the car. He wasn't supposed to be back tonight. The porch light flicked on. A clear sign, he was already walking up to the front door. Panic rose in my chest. I turned to Eric, trying to think straight, trying to find the right words, but nothing came out. Everything around me started to blur, the warmth of the house, the softness of the evening, the comfort of company. All of it replaced by dread. Eric didn't say a word. He moved quickly, grabbing his jacket from the back of the chair. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice calm, but his eyes alert. There was no time to answer. The sound of keys jingling outside the door froze us both. Then, click. The lock turned. I grabbed Eric's arm and whispered, go through the back. Now. He didn't argue. He slipped out of the kitchen just as the door swung open. My husband stepped inside, suitcase in hand, face tired but calm. Surprise, he said with a soft smile. Caught an early flight. I forced a smile, my hands trembling behind my back. I wasn't expecting you. He glanced around the living room, his eyes pausing just a second too long on the wine glasses on the coffee table. Then he looked back at me. Were you having someone over? I hesitated. My mind scrambled for an explanation, anything that wouldn't sound like a lie, even if it was one. The neighbor came to fix the leak. I offered him dinner as a thank you. That's all. He didn't say anything right away. He walked past me, his shoes echoing against the floor. The pause in his steps when he reached the back door made my chest tighten. I didn't know if Eric had made it out. I didn't know if the door had creaked. I didn't know anything except that the air between us was suddenly too sharp, too loaded. Then, just when I thought the moment had passed, I heard it, a phone buzz. From the kitchen counter. Not mine. Eric's. Left behind. My husband turned. Whose phone is that? And in that split second, everything I thought I could keep hidden started to unravel. My heart dropped. That single vibration from the phone felt louder than anything else in the room. My husband walked toward the kitchen slowly, his eyes narrowing, focused. I opened my mouth to say something, to stop him, to explain, to lie, anything. But the words wouldn't come. I could see the suspicion in his face growing by the second. He picked up the phone, looked at the screen. A missed call. No name, just a number. But the phone itself was enough. He looked at me. So, the neighbor just left, huh? I nodded, barely. Yes. Just a few minutes ago. He stared at the phone in his hand, then looked back at me. Then why is this still here? I swallowed hard. I don't know. Maybe he forgot, he must have left in a hurry. He walked past me again, straight to the back door. Pulled it open. And there stood Eric. Caught halfway through the yard, frozen in place like he knew he couldn't run now. The light from the open door spilled onto the grass, and the silence that followed was crushing. For a moment, no one moved. Then my husband turned around slowly, looked at me, not yelling, not angry, just stunned. You invited him in. You let him stay. I couldn't deny it anymore. Yes. I did. Eric stepped forward, holding his hands up slightly. Look, nothing happened. I was helping her with the sink. We had dinner. That's it. But it didn't matter what he said. The damage had already been done. My husband's silence said more than shouting ever could. He didn't look at Eric again. Just turned back to me. I came home early to surprise you, he said quietly. To try and fix what's been broken. That hit hard. Not because I didn't care. But because I hadn't realized he still did. I didn't plan this, I whispered. I didn't expect any of it. But I've been feeling so alone. He shook his head. We both have. But this isn't the answer. The silence stretched between us like a crack in the floor. Then, without saying anything more, he walked upstairs. The bedroom door closed softly behind him, not slammed, not angry, just final. Eric stayed in the yard, not moving. I stepped outside and handed him the phone. You should go, I said quietly. He nodded. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I know. But it's already here. He walked off into the night, and I stood there on the porch, suddenly more alone than I'd ever been. And just when I thought it was over, I noticed something strange. The phone I handed Eric, it wasn't his. Mine was still in my pocket. So whose was it? And that's when I realized, I might not be the only one hiding something in this house. I stared at the phone in my hand, my thoughts spinning. The wallpaper wasn't mine. The case wasn't mine. And it definitely wasn't Eric's either, his had a cracked corner. This one looked new. Clean. Almost hidden. I walked slowly back inside, still holding it like it might give me answers on its own. Whatever was going on, it wasn't just about me anymore. I waited until everything was quiet upstairs. Then I opened the phone. No passcode. Just a blank screen and a list of recent messages, none from Eric. But one name kept popping up. Unknown work. Every text was short, but clear. See you next weekend. Same hotel? She won't know. My hands shook as I scrolled down. There were photos too, hotel room selfies, timestamps that matched dates when my husband had been traveling for business. I sank onto the couch. For so long, I had blamed myself for the growing distance in our marriage. I thought I was the one letting go, failing, drifting. But maybe I wasn't the only one feeling alone. And maybe I wasn't the first to let someone in. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent the whole evening wrestling with guilt over what almost happened with Eric. But the real betrayal had already been happening, right under my nose. This phone, left behind like a warning or a confession, changed everything. The next morning, I made coffee like usual. My husband came downstairs, quiet, cautious. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, like two strangers sharing the same house. I didn't tell him about the phone. Not yet. Maybe I was still processing. Or maybe I wanted him to be the one to admit it. Eventually, I placed the phone in front of him. He stared at it, then at me. And he didn't deny it. He just lowered his eyes and said, I didn't know how to tell you. Neither of us had the energy to argue. We just sat there, two people holding on to a life that had already cracked in silence. In the end, the neighbor didn't ruin my marriage. The leak didn't start with a broken pipe. It started long before, in the small ways we stopped showing up for each other. This wasn't the ending I expected. But maybe it was the truth I needed. And sometimes, the truth is the only way forward, even when it breaks everything wide open. Infidelity changes people. Secrets leave a mark. But facing them? That's where healing finally begins. 38.